the years we've had Big Finish reproduce the unproduced Doctor Who stories, we've seen them adapt the Virgin New Adventures, and in today's review I'm going to be taking a look at another piece of Doctor Who media that has received treatment. As in today's review I'm going to be taking a look at the Doctor Who comic Adaptations Volume 1, starring Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor in two 2-hour adventures. First of which is Doctor Who and the Iron Legion, and the second being Doctor Who and the Star Beast, both of which have been adapted by Alan Barnes from original comic strip ideas by Pat Mills and John Wagner. This box set is in fact a rather exciting release, considering it is Big Finish essentially dipping their toes into a brand new area of Doctor Who media, and it is very different to adapting a novel or a story that we've seen already in the prose format, simply because all you need to do is convert over that narrative into the audio drama format and actually speak it verbally. In comic strips it is a little bit different, because you are essentially taking a 30-page comic and then transforming that into a 2-hour audio drama, meaning that it does have a lot more context and a lot more verbal dialogue, and also gives the characters a lot more history and a lot more depth as people. So first off, and as always, in the description below, I will leave the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It is currently out now at the pre-order price for £25 for the physical box set and £20 for the download. It will remain at the pre-order price up until the end of, I do believe, probably April or May 2019, and then it will no doubt go into the normal recommended retail price of around £30–35. And as per usual on the Big Finish website, you can also access all the technical information, the casting details, as well as the story details, and all the different credits that you do of course need for this release. Now both of the stories have of course been adapted by Alan Barnes, meaning that generally overall the techniques and styles that have been used are in fact rather similar throughout both stories, even though they are two completely separate adventures. And I think that it's fair to say that the style of these stories is a lot different to your standard Big Finish audio drama. Of course, previously, literally just in February this year, I have of course already reviewed the 4th Doctor Series 8 adventures, including Jane Slavin as Anne Kelslow, and I wanted to review those box sets simply because I had more time to actually review those box sets, because I found myself having a spare few days, and also at the same time I wanted to have a little bit more prior knowledge as to how Big Finish would normally approach the 4th Doctor in the non-comic strip format, and it kind of let me prepare for these releases, kind of being aware that once it hit March I would of course be sitting down to review this release. And it is very different, considering you have lots of different comic strip styles and traits within these two adventures. It is a lot more action-packed, a lot more fast-paced, and for that reason it is in fact very much like new series Doctor Who, both in the way of the actual storyline but also the actual characters. So discussing the production notes for this story, as I was saying, both of these episodes have been rewritten by Alan Barnes. The director is Nicholas Briggs, script editor is Nicholas Briggs, and as per usual the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haigh-Ellery. So firstly, discussing the 4th Doctor as a character, of course the legendary Tom Baker, and he is a Doctor that I've not really had too much experience in when it comes to the Big Finish audio dramas. Of course only recently I've reviewed his 8 adventures released as a part of the 2019 4th Doctor range, and other than that I've not really had much experience in his previous stories. I've listened to the odd one here and there, but nothing too prominent, nothing too substantial in order to get a good idea of what his era is like on Big Finish. However, something that is clear with the 4th Doctor is that he is a Doctor that is very much a legendary character. He's a character that is a staple in British science fiction. He is the Doctor that stands out more than all of the others, because when people think of classic series Doctor Who, they think of Tom Baker, they think of his rainbow scarf because of how bold and loud that costume is, and that is of course referred to within the actual character. In this story we have exactly the same 4th Doctor. As to usual, he is loud, he's very sort of unusual, very alien, having odd quirks and funny jokes, but also at the same time you can tell that Tom Baker has put a lot of personality and character into the 4th Doctor, because over the many years he has gradually got used to his character inside out. He's managed to contribute different aims to that character, and also at the same time he's managed to improve some of his own character traits and actually put that into the role and implement them, and that is something that is seen throughout this story. It is the usual Fourth Doctor. He is fun, he's very warm when it comes to talking to different people. Also at the same time, he makes each story a really nice, entertaining listen.
It is designed like the Imperial Eagle of Rome.
Oh, come on, Ironicus. Who's the pretty boy? It's a parrot. And that's all you are, a parrot.
And that is actually all that I'm going to go into for characters at the minute, because no doubt through explaining the actual stories, I will briefly touch on the different characters. I would just also like to give a credit to Alan Barnes, because he is the writer of these 2 episodes. He has gone and actually changed them for the audio drama format. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit because he has done a very good job. As I said earlier, this is a lot different to adapting a book or a novel, simply because you normally have the foundations for the most part there. You have the backstory of the characters, you have pretty much the main material to work with. With a comic strip, it is a lot different. You physically need to make these rather 2D looking characters actually jump up from the page and make them feel real within an actual audio drama for listening entertainment. I think that is something that is very clear throughout these stories. I think that especially in Doctor Who and the Star Beast, the 2nd episode featuring Beep the Meep, you have lots of different personalities in there, but we also in fact have an episode set within the north of England, within a mining village, and you have lots of different stereotypes but also believable northern people in there at the same time as well. So it is nice to have a little bit of that identity actually established within a Doctor Who story, especially when it previously wasn't actually mentioned within the original comic. So talking about Doctor Who and the Iron Legion, first off, I really like the way that these stories are actually using Doctor Who and in the title. It's a really nice novelty, of course something that we used a lot within the Doctor Who Target novels, and I think it is a really nice way to represent the story as a whole. It's a nice tale, it's a big extravagant adventure, and Doctor Who and the Iron Legion I think for me is my least favourite of the 2 stories, but that said the 2nd one does feature Beep the Meep, so it doesn't really say too much. I think that this episode is fun. It's sort of one of those science fiction wacky and wild episodes because it is something that only Doctor Who can really do. You have that whole idea of the Romans and their culture, however exaggerated and made futuristic and kind of put onto an alien planet, and in the story we get to see this rather odd society of people that have been influenced by the Romans, and you basically have these intergalactic games where you have these different sort of essentially experimental aliens that have gone completely wrong, like horrific animals and creatures that are put up to fight, much like within the Colosseum, like how we had lions and things fighting these different people that have came from the innocent town of Stockbridge on Earth. Of course, once again a staple for Doctor Who comic strips as well as other external Doctor Who media. Stockbridge is one of those little countryside villages that seems to be hit by Doctor Who aliens quite a lot, and I like its reference. I don't think ever reviewed anything with Stockbridge in, however it does come up on the odd occasion, so it is nice to have that reference in there. We do in fact meet 2 people in particular in this episode that are residents of Stockbridge, the first of which is Doug, as played by Steve Hansel, and then the second of which is in fact Viv, who is played by Esther Hall, and both of those characters are basically your husband and wife relationship pretty much. They are really nice, really believable, and it's great to in fact see these rather normal residents of this little sort of countryside town plummeted into space, and you have all these unusual creatures that they meet along the way. Everything about this episode is odd and different, and it's kind of, I think, a little bit complex in parts as well. I think especially around parts 2 and 3 it can be a little bit hard to listen to at some points. I think there is a lot of things going on with a lot of different characters, and because all of them are quite different in their own way, it does make them a little bit easier to identify, but only if you are solely listening to that story. If you're doing other things at the same time, you will get distracted and you will quite easily kind of hop out of the story, and you will need to rewind a few tracks in order to fully understand what is going on. So do be warned, this episode is kind of for new listeners, but it's for the new listeners that are willing to actually put the effort into listening to the actual story and not getting distracted. If you are a regular Big Finish listener, no doubt this is something that you are used to doing pretty much every single month. Of course, due to this episode being set within a kind of distant future in the Galactic Roman Empire, we do in fact meet two aliens along the way as well. The first of which is Vesuvius, the most ancient computer android robot of the Galactic Roman Empire, who is played by Toby Longsworth, and he is the highlight of this story for me. I absolutely love him. He is absolutely brilliant. I believe that he's probably in the trailer as well. He is very quirky, he is very funny. Basically this android robot that is on his last legs, and the Doctor needs to constantly kind of relight his flame in his chest, and he is very unusual. He makes these odd stutters every so often.
Doctor, now we're going back towards the guards!
And he is a little bit like one of those 1970s comedians that you get within a TV show on the BBC that is very quirky, but also at the same time very awkward in the way that he says things, and he is absolutely brilliant. I really did love him, as I say, by far the highlight for the story for me. And we also get introduced to a character called Morris, who's played by Joseph Kloska, and he is the character who's on the cover for this story, having the very rather gruesome looking, in fact, sort of zip up his face along the nose section and sort of the implant of the jawline. It's very odd. It kind of reminds me of a half-converted Cyberman, but he's basically this character that constantly refers to himself in third person, and he constantly speaks like this, and he's a very sort of, once again, quite funny and innocent, and you can see how he's basically this barbaric alien who wants to escape, but also at the same time his appearance has been altered by the amount of times that he's tried to escape. He is a character that is enslaved by this race, and they have essentially tortured him, so there was a little bit of a sympathy storyline in there as well, and there is a sad moment with him kind of midway through, I think it's episode 3, which I'll admit, it did in fact make me stop for a second. It was rather emotional, but yeah, by far for me, Vesuvius is the highlight. Absolutely love him, closely followed by Tom Baker, who once again, those two bounced off each other really nicely. As for the actual problem that needs to be faced in this story that the Doctor needs to overcome, basically we have a story that is based around almost censorship and the truth being uncovered, and then basically having a society uprising. So yeah, it's quite nice, it's quite cool. However, once again, not necessarily too amazing. By far for me, the main highlight is the second story and not so much the Iron Legion. And what is this second story that I'm incredibly excited to talk about? It is of course Doctor Who and the Star Beast, which does of course feature Beep the Meep, who is on the front cover of this box set, and I just knew as soon as they announced Beep the Meep, I thought I'm absolutely going to love this character, aren't I? Because I really enjoyed Chameleon recently in the monthly range, I absolutely adore Frobisher in the Maltese Penguin and the Holy Terror, and I really like the Sixth Doctor. Those are three things that are unusual, but also probably some of the best and unique parts of Doctor Who history. Therefore, when Beep the Meep comes along, he's a little tiny furball that basically says beep and meep constantly, then I just knew he would be one of my favourite characters for this whole box set, and no doubt somebody who I would want to spin off of by the end of listening to the story. And Beep the Meep is basically this little vicious creature, isn't he? He's made to be so cute and amazing, but what I like about the character is, yes, he is very cute, and you can't help but like him within the first introduction for episodes 1 and episodes 2. However, he is a sitting threat right in the very middle of this story. I think that Alan Barnes has written this story in a way that basically doesn't hide that. It is a Doctor Who story that doesn't hide its villain. You know that eventually Beep the Meep is going to turn around and start acting evil, and that is exactly what he does in this story as well. And it is left to quite far to the very end of this episode, but I like the way that it is gradually brought into the story. There is this wonderful moment where you in fact go inside Beep the Meep's head and you actually see his thought processes and his actual kind of evil side lurking away, whilst he needs to tolerate life with these teenagers that are trying to save Beep the Meep from normal society, and basically he wants to rip their heads off, to put it bluntly. And he's funny and he's adorable, but he's also evil and he'll probably kill you, and that's what I kind of like about him. And even though the character is male, he is in fact voiced by Bethan Dixon Bate, And I think that considering he is a male character, apparently, I don't know how you can give a alien furball creature that says beep and meep a gender, but hey, apparently he is male according to the comics, but he's voiced by a female, and Bethan does a very good job throughout this story, really entertaining. I love the way that she can squeak his different beeps and his different meeps, but also I like his evil side as well, and the way we actually go into his head is really cool, and I like the way that we actually almost jump into the story and see the episode from his perspective. Equally, in fact, in Doctor Who and the Iron Legion, you see the Fourth Doctor actually using a very similar trait, where you see him going into his mind and having his thought processes and trying to decipher what alien he's trying to face within the Iron Legion, and kind of if he's faced them before. And it very much put me in the mindset of Sherlock and his mind palace, kind of the Doctor guiding you through his mind and the way that he reaches certain conclusions. And for me, I did think it was a little bit jarring. I think it was quite unusual as well, considering this whole box set is unusual. I kind of let it slide a little bit, but it did take me out of the story, I think. I think that it kind of lost its pace a little bit when we had those sections. I probably would have rather them took that out completely as opposed to having it within the actual story, because to me, it didn't really contribute too much, and I'm kind of glad that that was left in the second story solely down to Beep the Meep, simply because it worked a lot more with that character, because Beep the Meep kind of had something to hide from the other characters that you see in this episode, as opposed to in the other story where you had the Doctor, and you could have quite easily have had exactly the same conversation, but with another person within the actual scene, as opposed to the Doctor having the conversation within his own mind, kind of. This episode does of course also introduce two Northern teenagers, both of which are really nice actually. I really did enjoy them. I thought their personalities really nicely shined throughout this episode. The first of which is called Sharon and is played by Rhiannon Starbuck, and then the second of which is a character called Fudge, who's played by Ben Hunter, and he's basically a comic book geek, which is perfect for this story considering it is a comic book adaptation. And I really believed them as teenagers. I actually felt like that they were school students coming into this scenario, discovering an alien, and then they are helping the Doctor throughout this story. And normally when you bring child actors into Doctor Who, it never really works. I think that the sole reason why it works in this story is because the children that they are playing, or the teenagers that they are playing, are not teenagers. They are, I think, probably 20 to 25-year-olds. It's in that region about, so they are professional actors, and they have no doubt had a bit of experience, and that definitely shows throughout this story. They can play younger, which is very effective. I don't know if Sharon was a reoccurring character for other Doctor Who Fourth Doctor comics. Maybe if she is, we'll get to see more Fourth Doctor and Sharon adventures in the future. I suppose only time will tell to see if this box set was in fact popular to lead to a second volume of Fourth Doctor comic adventures. As I said earlier, this episode is in fact set within a little industrial mining town within the north called Blackcastle, and we have this whole focus around the steel mills, and basically a UFO has crashed and it's gone into the steel mills, and basically they need to cordon everything off, and you have this stereotypical northern village trying to cope with that, and basically the council are trying to cover up the UFO, just saying that an explosion has happened in the steel mill when everybody knows something is going down, and the northern people basically just want to get on with their own jobs. And I think that it's really good the way that they've represented the North in this story. It was really funny to start with. There was lots of really funny and light-hearted characters, but also at the same time the way that they presented the accents. There was a lot of we're going to shop, we're going to mountain, we're going down to mill. There's a lot of that, which is of course nice because I'm northern myself, even though my accent isn't to shop and to whatever. I didn't really pick it up, I don't know why, but hey, I grew up around northern people, but the accent just didn't really stick with me, and it's just nice to have my area represented within Doctor Who. I enjoyed the fact that this story wasn't just another southern village or set within London, because that is what we get within Doctor Who a lot. It's just always London or the south or nothing else, and it's nice to have a northern story that also isn't too north that it's Scotland, because we've had Scotland episodes. We want some Midlands or northern stories, or even Irish. We've not had much Irish in Doctor Who yet, so yeah, maybe Big Finish could do something with Ireland at some point as well. So just as a final little selling point in this story, it starts off with a little cameo to Angela Rippon, who is in fact a very well-known newsreader in BBC News. I think that she presented between like 1970 and 1980, and she also does a few antiques programmes on the BBC to this day, so she is a very big figurehead within the BBC, and she is in fact in this story playing Angela Rippon. She's in fact playing herself, playing her actual career as a newsreader, which is really lovely, a great reference, and just another little novelty in this story that I did like. And I think that what I took from Doctor Who and the Star Beast is that this episode is a lot of fun, a great laugh, and as I say, by far for me, my favourite episode out of the two stories. Even though the Iron Legion in fact had a few of the similar traits in there, it was in fact a very fun listen, it was fast paced and it was action packed, but the second story for me just teetered over the top a bit, completely because of Beep the Meep and that Angela Rippon cameo. But just like stories like this that are fun, light-hearted, but also have a darker side at the same time, and a bit of deadpan. I like an alien that can be adorable and cuddly, but also within the next scene could potentially rip your eyes out. I think that's just oddly rather nice, in a non-dark way. Also, just to finish off this review as another additional mention, it is really lovely to see Chris Walker-Thomson in this story as well, who does of course do his absolutely phenomenal Patrick Troughton impression. He has been all over the Doctor Who fan base now for quite a few years. I've met him in person quite a few times, lovely guy, and it's lovely to see that Big Finish have in fact taken him on board after many years of doing some absolutely wonderful impressions and of course voice acting. He's just brilliant, and I think that it's only a matter of time until we see more of him on future releases. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this review of the 4th Doctor Comic Adaptations Volume 1. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Generally, if you have any questions about these two stories, then please do feel free to leave them in the description below, and I will of course reply to them at some point in the near future. Overall, for this actual box set, I think that it is a nice set of adventures. Of course, having two 2-hour stories is rather unusual. I was worried that that would in fact take its toll, be a little bit too long-winded, especially considering that these stories did used to be only a 30-page comic originally. I do think that in the Iron Legion that maybe did have some truth to it. To some extent, I did think that it did drag in some parts. However, for me, the main episode that did prove me wrong was of course the Star Beast, which was a lot of fun. I think that if you are a Big Finish fan, then this box set is in fact worth picking up alone for that second story. If you're a new listener and is kind of looking for a pivotal, amazing release to start off your Big Finish journey, I wouldn't really recommend this one. It's not completely standout. It isn't one that's right up there at the top of my list or anything like that. It is just an enjoyable adventure, and there is certainly a lot more higher box sets out there that I would much more recommend, such as the War Master, both of those box sets, or the Gallifrey Time War series, which series 2 of that is coming out soon. Yay! Very exciting. And Classic Doctor's New Monsters, as well as a few other episodes I've of course reviewed on this channel over the years. So thank you very much for watching this review, and I guess I'll see you all in more Doctor Who content absolutely every single week as I take a look at more Doctor Who media throughout the 50 years of Doctor Who history. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.
You said it, mate. Meep, meep.